What would happen if every human disappeared tonight? Imagine that at midnight tonight, every human on Earth disappears. Not dies, not evacuates, just gone. Your phone is still charging, dinner is still sitting on tables, cars are still moving down highways, planes are still crossing oceans, and for a few moments, almost everything humanity built keeps working as if nothing happened. But it wouldn't stay that way for long, because civilization looks automatic until nobody is there to run it. So, what happens next? The first few minutes would probably be the most violent. Millions of moving cars would suddenly have nobody behind the wheel. Some would coast to a stop, others would leave the road, hit barriers, or crash into each other. Aircraft already in the sky would continue flying on autopilot for a while, but without pilots, air traffic control, or anyone to land them, eventually they'd run out of fuel. Trains would be different. Many modern rail systems have safety systems designed to stop a train if the driver becomes unresponsive. So while roads descend into chaos, some trains may simply brake to a halt. Meanwhile, inside your house, almost nothing has changed. The lights are still on, your fridge is still humming, your Wi Fi router is still blinking, traffic lights continue changing for cars that will never arrive. Security cameras keep recording, automatic doors keep opening when something triggers their sensors. For a brief period, civilization becomes a machine running for an audience of zero. But then the first invisible system starts falling apart. Electricity. How long would electricity last without humans? The electrical grid isn't one giant battery. Electricity has to be generated and consumed in balance while equipment constantly responds to changing conditions. And suddenly, billions of people have disappeared. Factories are unattended, machines stop or fail, equipment trips offline, power stations lose operators. Parts of the grid would automatically disconnect themselves when conditions moved outside safe limits. Some generating stations would shut down, others could continue automatically for longer. Hydroelectric plants and some renewable installations could potentially outlast facilities that require constant fuel and human intervention. So there wouldn't be one dramatic moment where every light on Earth goes dark. Instead, darkness would spread unevenly. One city loses power, then another, then entire regions. Islands of electricity could remain while huge sections of the planet go black. And once the electricity disappears, a surprising amount of modern civilization disappears with it. Water pumps stop, fuel pumps stop. Many communication systems eventually exhaust their backup power. Refrigeration ends, servers shut down, and somewhere inside millions of abandoned homes, the last Wi Fi router finally stops blinking. But there's a much more unsettling question. What happens to the machines we built that really shouldn't be left alone? Would nuclear power plants explode if humans disappeared? Probably not in the Hollywood sense. Nuclear reactors are designed to respond to serious faults by shutting the reactor down, and loss of offsite power normally triggers a reactor trip and backup systems. But shutting down a nuclear reaction doesn't mean the plant instantly becomes cold. The fuel continues producing decay heat. That heat has to be removed. Plants have emergency systems and backup generators precisely because losing external electricity is a known possibility. The problem in our scenario is different. Nobody is ever coming back. No maintenance crew, no fuel deliveries, no operator responding when equipment eventually fails. Exactly what happens would depend enormously on reactor design, site conditions, and which systems remained functional. So it would be misleading to say every nuclear plant simply explodes. It would also be misleading to say every facility remains perfectly safe forever. For a while, humanity's most complicated machines would be protecting themselves from the absence of the people who built them. But while our machines struggle without us, something else would notice our disappearance immediately. Animals. What would happen to our pets? For wildlife, humanity disappearing would remove one enormous source of disturbance. But for domesticated animals, the beginning could be brutal. A dog locked inside an apartment doesn't understand that its owner isn't coming back. Neither does a hamster in a cage, fish in aquariums, animals in barns. Millions of pets would be trapped behind doors, fences, and windows designed specifically to keep them inside. Animals with access to the outdoors would have a much better chance. Cats already capable of hunting could become feral. Some dogs could escape and form free-ranging populations. Farm animals would face very different outcomes depending on whether they could get out and whether the local environment could support them. And over generations, nature would start selecting for something humans had spent thousands of years suppressing: the ability to survive without us. But animals wouldn't be the only ones moving into our homes, because once maintenance stops, nature doesn't politely wait outside. What would Earth look like 10 years after humans? At first, an abandoned city would still look surprisingly normal. Then small failures would begin stacking up. Drains clog, leaves collect, pipes freeze and burst in colder climates. Water gets into tiny cracks, metal corrodes, wood rots, roofs leak, and plants exploit practically every opening we leave behind. Without people cutting grass or clearing vegetation, streets and sidewalks would become increasingly overgrown. Roots widen existing cracks, seeds take hold in gutters and rooftops. Animals begin using buildings as shelter. But the image of every city becoming a giant forest almost immediately is exaggerated. A dry city could remain dry. A freezing city would decay differently from a tropical one. Nature wouldn't reclaim Earth according to one universal schedule. It would reclaim Berlin differently from Dubai. After 10 years, many buildings would still be standing. Many roads would still be obvious. Cars would still be everywhere. You'd instantly know a civilization had existed here. Give it a century, though, and the question becomes much more interesting. How long would our cities survive? Buildings seem permanent because a human lifetime is short. They're not. They're systems we continuously repair. Water is one of their biggest enemies. Once roofs fail, moisture reaches structural materials. Freeze-thaw cycles widen cracks, steel corrodes, concrete deteriorates, trees grow where nobody intended trees to grow. Different structures would survive for radically different lengths of time. Some wooden buildings could disappear comparatively quickly. Massive stone monuments could remain recognizable far longer. Underground structures might survive in fragments even after what stood above them collapsed. Dams and levees would eventually fail without inspection and repair, reshaping some landscapes. Satellites would fall from orbit on wildly different timescales depending on their altitude. And after thousands of years, most of the everyday world you recognize would be gone. Your house, your supermarket, the cafe down the road, most cars, most signs, most ordinary objects sitting around you right now, which leaves one final question. If another intelligent species appeared far in the future, how would they know we were ever here? What would be the last evidence humanity existed? Probably not skyscrapers, and probably not your phone. The longest lasting evidence of humanity may be the things we've changed on a planetary scale. Plastics and unusual manufactured materials can enter sediments. Mining has rearranged enormous quantities of rock. Industrial activity has altered chemical signatures. Nuclear activity has produced distinctive artificial radionuclides. Fossils of domesticated animals could reveal something strange too. Imagine a future geologist discovering an abrupt geological layer filled with the remains of billions upon billions of chickens. They might not know our names. They wouldn't know our countries. They wouldn't know who won our wars or what we argued about online. But Earth itself could preserve evidence that for one incredibly thin slice of geological time, something unusual happened here. A species appeared. It transformed enormous parts of the planet, built cities, changed rivers, split atoms, sent machines beyond Earth, and then, overnight, it vanished. The lights would go out first, the cities would go later, but the fingerprints of humanity could remain long after almost everything we recognize as civilization was gone.